In terms of how the industry has evolved over the last 2 years, I think there's a couple of important influences. One is we're an industry, animal health, that's ripe for evolution, if not revolution, given the pace of technology change and the expansion of the industry and the understanding, I think, that people have of the role that animals play in their lives. It's becoming more and more important for food, more and more important for companionship, so that trend has continued. Obviously, we've experienced the pandemic situation where a lot of mitigation activity has brought tremendous tension to how we live our daily lives. That includes what happens with our pets, that includes with where our food comes from. So it really has stress tested the robustness of this industry in a powerful way. And I think what we've learned is people are going to prioritize food and high quality protein, and they're going to prioritize their pets in a situation like that. What we saw were people adopting more pets. What we saw was people worrying about where their food came more. Supply chain concerns. So I think it amplified the role that this industry plays and for the basic things that we find important as humans. And that really comes to the front when we're faced with a pandemic challenge like the one we have. Sure, it's a really exciting time to talk about what's happening in the science of the microbiome and how it applies to animal health. In particular, I think it's been an important ingredient of how we think about livestock production in the past, things like direct-fed microbials or molecules that are sourced from microbiome, like antibiotics originally. But I think the science is taking us to a new level where we now understand why and how things work. And we can be more of a designer instead of a discoverer of phenomenological things in animal health and really target solutions for the big problems that face livestock production. The fascinating thing about it is in the same moment, that same science can apply to treating disease or affecting conditions in pets as well. So the pioneering efforts on the livestock side is going to lead to spillover effects on the pet side, all based on what the microbiome science can teach us and can yield as new product opportunities. I think we've got a regulatory system and that has recognized the threat of antimicrobial resistance and has made constraints around how we use certain kinds of molecules, chemicals, antibiotics. We can't use them as prolifically as we used them in the past. They have to be very targeted as a last resort. Well, what does the livestock producer do in the absence of those tools that they came to depend on to optimize the production system that they conduct? They need other solutions, and I fundamentally believe that what we've learned about the microbiome is going to stand in the gap that has been created and exists and will not bring with it any new concerns around AMR. In fact, it'll unlock the science to know exactly how to help the animal best feed and produce, but then maintain a healthy defense against pathogens and not require antibiotics nearly as much. I think in two ways. One is, let's recognize that AMR is really an environmental threat if you think about it at its core. And so it addresses that directly, and more sustainable practices as a result will be recognized when we deal with that threat straight on as we are. The other is that the same science that we come to understand that what happens in an animal's gut leads to things like methane production. We can pursue that and see if there aren't novel microbial-based solutions that can address that biology fundamentally and again allow the animal to convert the feed that they take in into just the things that we want from them, not the things we don't want. So I think livestock producers really are seeing a revolution in how they think about livestock health. And the good news is the science is here to meet them where their problem is. The challenge is really well-established operations are really good businesses because they've got a reproducible pattern that they can rely on. And now as that has to change, it creates uncertainty about how well their business will perform. Can they afford replacing something that was much cheaper with something that looks more expensive but may not generate the same kind of results? So I think it's incumbent on us, the product makers, to work with them, to help them understand, to design and develop products that meet their need and address it. And then we have to educate. There's no question we have to educate. And the way we approach them is we don't just send them a website and ask them to order our product. We have to get in their environment, business-to-business kind of relationships, particularly on the livestock side. But even on the pet side, the relationship around the adoption of new technology is a social exercise. And it needs to be informed by high-quality science, and that takes time. So the effort in front of the customer needs to be there. Yeah, so trends in sort of food that I think have impact on the industry is, as you cited, where does the food come from? How is it being produced? How do we enable the diversity of diets that are evolving out there? There's some people that want to get their protein source not from animals. There are other people who don't get enough animal protein of the kind they prefer. So we've got to address these trends from a macro perspective and understand that that diversity of opportunity is there. We need something like 44 million more tons of animal protein by 2030, right, to meet the current demand for animal protein. And we have to do that with less inputs. We can't occupy a bigger planet with more water and more land, and we can't introduce more animals into the equation. So we have to find more efficient methods and models for doing that. We've got to get down to the fundamental science. We've got to explore it, examine it, find solutions, and then be willing to explain it to people so that they understand it's not something to fear, but something to embrace. Yeah, the animal health industry has a story to tell, and it needs to be positive stories, not negative ones, right? Concerns about animal welfare and factory farming and ingredients that can harm the human, those have been the things of the past. In fact, that has motivated the market to talk about food production as things you should fear, and so choose away from practices that lead to those fearful things. What's not in your food has become more important than what people know is in their food. So I think we've got to flip the script. We've got to learn from history and embrace the scientific discourse and explain to people where it comes from, and not just sort of say, trust us, we're scientists. That's not going to be good enough, because in fact, I think some industry players have let consumers down. And haven't taken accountability for improvements that could be made or changes that could occur that could benefit all the stakeholders. So I think we just need to step up to another level of relationship and performance in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, given the fact that we were sort of away for a while in terms of in-person collaboration and interaction like this conference presents, I think what we learned is how precious it is when we have it, when we come back. Can we do a lot of work through remote means? Absolutely, and that's very effective. There are some things that are more effective that way, and that's good, and so I think we've come to understand and appreciate that, but nothing takes the place of two humans getting together or a group of people in a room, brainstorming, thinking about the what-if possibilities and getting conviction about it together to move it forward. And that's what the in-person conference represents. And I think we talked about all the dynamic forces for change. That's how humans adapt to change, is we collaborate and innovate together to deal with the tension, the negative tension, and turn it into a positive one. So there's no question conferences like this really sort of put fuel in the tank for ongoing collaboration and spark new ones as well. Yeah, this event for me actually occurs at a time where I've made a career shift. I was an executive at Elanco for the last 6 years. I come to appreciate actually the animal health industry in great detail through coming to this meeting. Met a lot of my network and my colleagues. I've retired from Elanco at the end of last year. I'm working with Elanco to carve out a technology platform in the microbiome space that we intend to make into a standalone biotech company focused on animal health. And so this has been a great way for me to reconnect with possible collaborators, possible customers, possible investors. So it's really, I've come full circle. I sat in the corporate chair before thinking that, I had a role to play to help convene people, which I did, but now I'm a consumer of that same convention in a way that I wasn't before. It's really exciting.